This is McCook's Mr. Bill. You're here for a story. I'm out here at the ranch, and I asked to borrow this .458 Winchester Magnum for the story. A .458. The story was about 25 years ago. See, I parked next to junior high and high school there in McCook, Nebraska for 22 years before they asked me not to park there anymore. Of course, it was so that they could sell inside, junk food inside, rather than to buy from me. But be that as it may, that 22 years was, I got to see a lot of interesting characters. Very few of them ever matched Cowboy. That's what everybody called him. At 12 years old, he was working full field hand for his father. Driving tractor, especially through the summer, was nothing to drive 14 hours a day for his father. And he saved up enough money, he bought a few head of cattle that summer, and he paid his dad rent for the livestock that he bought. By the time he was 17, and I ran into him, and he started coming to the candy truck at noontime, he had 50 head of cattle. 17-year-old senior had 50 head of cattle. And he rented land from another person, another individual, a landowner, a quarter section of ground, 320 acres, and ran that 50 head of cattle on there. And he was a businessman, made more money than some of even the teachers, I'm here to tell you. He had business sense, and he was hard as nails, and he knew livestock as he had them, since he was 12. Well, one day he come walking up to the candy truck and he said, "Mr. Bill," he said, "I'm gonna get me a big gun." And I was kind of surprised because in his pickup there was a .30-06 hanging in the back window. Back then the school didn't give a darn about that because they knew he had common sense, and anybody who caused him trouble they'd call the cops immediately, but they never had to. Never had a gun incident in McCook High School. With that in mind though, I said, you got a .30-06 in your window. I said, that's a big enough gun to take anything on the North American continent. My wife, she's killed some 40 head of deer with a .30-06, and one shot does the job. Be that as it may, he said, "No, I want a big gun." And I said, "Just what are you thinking about?" And he said, "I want a .458 Winchester Magnum. .458 Winchester Magnum." I said, "Dear God, that's an elephant gun." I said, "It kills out there, but it'll cripple you from behind." He said, "Nah," he said, "I'm sure I can take it." And I said, "Well, you're 150 pounds? I said, "It'll beat you up pretty good, I'm afraid." Be that as it may, he made his own money. So I figured it was up to him to make his own decisions. And so I allowed him and didn't allow him. I just said, okay. Well, that weekend he'd hit a gun show with his dad. Dad had to do the buying. But he bought a .458 Winchester Magnum. I saw him the next week, and I said, "You got the gun?" He said, "Yes, sir, I bought that gun." And I said, "How many times did you shoot it?" And he said, "Once." And I said, "Well, why didn't you shoot it twice?" And he said, "You couldn't pay me enough money to pull that trigger a second time." He said, "It knocked me on my butt." And I said, "Well, I was assuming a 150-pound young man would take a pretty good beating from that rifle." And he said he just couldn't have it. And I said, "Well, what'd you do with the gun then?" He said, "Well, I sold it back to the store that I bought it from." And I said, "How much did you lose?" And he said, $300. And I said, "So you bought that gun, pulled the trigger once, and sold it back to him for a $300 loss." I said, "That's a pretty expensive education." And I said, "I bet that .30-06 don't look so bad anymore." This is McCook's Mr. Bill saying that we need more young people with courage and common sense. And it sure don't hurt if they got a gun and they know how to use it. If they know how to use it. But nobody, I'm telling you, nobody needs a .458 Winchester Magnum, in my humble opinion. Rate this film.